The wrestling world is stunned after reports that Sheamus is leaving WWE following nearly 2 decades. The Celtic Warrior reportedly rejected a reworked contract, sparking emotional reactions across the locker room. Stay with me because one rival's shocking comment may have just revealed where he's headed next. The news dropped fast. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select reported that Sheamus is set to depart WWE once his current contract expires, and within minutes, the wrestling world stopped scrolling to pay attention. This wasn't a release, this wasn't a firing. WWE reportedly approached Sheamus about restructuring his deal while he was sidelined with an injury, and he swiftly rejected the offer. He said no, flat no. And that single decision set off a chain reaction across 2 rival wrestling promotions. The first big voice to jump in wasn't a friend, it was an enemy. AEW World Champion MJF took a shot at Sheamus in a post on his Instagram story, reviving old beef the two had traded on Twitter years earlier. MJF didn't wish him well, he didn't offer some polite good luck out there. He went for the throat, resurrecting a screenshot of their old back and forth, and captioning it with a callback to Sheamus's old independent name, daring him to bring the fight to AEW. Friedman posted the caption, "Bring that smoke, O'Shaughnessy," referencing the ring name Sheamus used before WWE ever signed him. It read less like a goodbye and more like a challenge letter. And this wasn't the first time MJF has done this. According to Heavycom's Joey Haverford, MJF only speaks up on WWE departures when he expects that person is headed to AEW or when he's building toward a program with them. That's not a small detail. That's MJF, arguably the best talker in the business right now, treating Sheamus's exit as the opening bell of something bigger. The old insult he dug up wasn't gentle either. MJF once told Sheamus to stop now or I'm gonna devour you, mocking his height and his slow rise to popularity. That's the tone, not mourning, not tribute, a call-out. But MJF wasn't reacting in a vacuum. He was reacting to a name that already has deep roots on the other side of the industry, Claudio Castagnoli. For years, Castagnoli wrestled under the name Cesaro inside WWE. And for years, he and Sheamus were a tag team so dominant they're still talked about today. The two men, known as The Bar, held tag team gold together on 5 separate occasions. Castagnoli left WWE first back in 2022, and he's been thriving in AEW ever since. So when word broke that Sheamus was walking too, everyone in the wrestling world did the same math at once. 2 names, 1 old tag team, 1 rival promotion already waiting. Then there's Adam Copeland, the wrestler most fans still know as Edge. He and Sheamus aren't just former opponents, they're close friends outside the ring. One writer covering the story noted that Sheamus was on the mountain bike ride with Adam Copeland when Copeland crashed and realized afterward that his body felt strong enough to consider an in-ring comeback. The same comeback that eventually led Copeland into AEW. That connection matters here because Copeland's own story is basically a preview of what could happen to Sheamus next. A WWE legend out of contract, showing up in a rival ring within months. Cinemable's Mick Jost drew the same line, pointing out that Sheamus was Copeland's final WWE opponent. And Copeland himself ended up jumping to AEW right after that farewell match. Jost even floated that Tony Khan might bite the same way with Sheamus. So within the same news cycle, you've got an active rival calling him out, a tag partner already established across the aisle, and a close friend whose own exit reads like a blueprint. 3 different names, 3 different angles, and all of it converging on the same question. What does Sheamus do now that WWE is no longer where his story continues? The details of the exit itself only make the reactions land harder. His current contract is set to expire soon, and because he wasn't released outright, WWE has no reason to impose the standard 90-day non-compete clause they used with the New Day earlier this year. That means the moment his deal runs out, he can sign anywhere. No waiting period, no cooling off window. He could, in theory, be in an AEW ring the same week his WWE contract dies. That's part of why MJF wasted no time. If there's smoke to bring, there's no lag before the match could actually happen. And Sheamus himself seemed to confirm the shift before anyone even asked him directly. Following the news, he updated his social media, dropping the Sheamus branding and switching to his real name, S. Farrelly. He also changed his bio to simply read Pro Wrestler, stripping out any mention of WWE entirely. Nobody had to ask if he was retiring. The bio answered it before the questions started. He's not done, he's just done there. Ringside News framed the social move well, noting that Sheamus spent nearly 19 years under the WWE banner. So wiping WWE from his own bio wasn't a small update, it landed loud. 19 years of identity tied to one company's name, removed in a single edit. That's the kind of detail that makes wrestlers pay attention, because it signals intent louder than any statement could. So here's where things stood within hours of the news: MJF throwing a public callout. Castagnoli's name already circling as the obvious tag reunion. Copeland's Ona EW jump treated as the roadmap. And Sheamus silently changing 3 words in his bio that said everything his mouth hadn't yet. That's not a quiet goodbye, that's the opening chapter of a fight nobody's finished writing yet. And to understand why it's landing this hard, you have to go back to how Sheamus got here in the first place. To understand why wrestlers reacted the way they did, you have to understand what Sheamus actually built inside that company. This wasn't a mid-card guy quietly aging out. This was one of the most decorated performers of his generation. And his story started long before the red hair and the brogue kick became household wrestling imagery. Sheamus began working for WWE in 2006, officially making his main roster debut in 2009. Before that, he was grinding on the European independent circuit as Sheamus O'Shaughnessy. The name MJF would later dig up to needle him. WWE signed him into their developmental system, joining as a member of Florida Championship Wrestling. The promotion's development brand at the time, most call-ups take years to find their footing. Sheamus didn't wait. Less than a year after debuting on the main roster, Sheamus defeated John Cena at TLC to win the WWE Championship in December 2009. Think about how fast that is. A guy shows up, and within months he's beating the face of the entire company for the top title. That kind of push doesn't happen by accident. It happens when management sees a main event talent and decides to fast-track him. Sporting his signature fiery red hair and hulking frame, Sheamus became a fan favorite of Vince McMahon, who personally pushed him towards stardom. From there, the resume just kept stacking. He became the first Irishman to ever hold the WWE Championship. And by the time his run slowed down, he had 4 total world championships to his name, 3 WWE titles, and 1 World Heavyweight Championship. He also picked up 3 reigns as United States Champion, multiple tag title runs, a King of the Ring win in 2010, a Royal Rumble victory in 2012, and a Money in the Bank cash-in win in 2015. That's not a career, that's a trophy case. He's one of only 2 wrestlers in history to win both King of the Ring and Money in the Bank, a stat that puts him in genuinely rare company. One moment from that run still gets brought up constantly: his shockingly quick win over Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 27. An 18-second squash that stunned the crowd and became one of the most talked about opening matches in WrestleMania history. It wasn't universally loved in the moment, but it cemented him as a heel who could move a crowd's emotions instantly, which is its own kind of skill. But if you ask fans what defines Sheamus's legacy, most of them won't point to singles gold first. They'll point to the bar. His partnership with Cesaro, the wrestler now known in AEW as Claudio Castagnoli, turned into one of the most beloved tag teams of the modern era. Together, they held tag team gold 5 times between 2016 and 2019. And the chemistry between a hard-hitting Irish brawler and a technically gifted Swiss powerhouse just worked in a way few pairings ever do. Fans didn't just respect the bar, they loved them. And that bond is exactly why Castagnoli's name became the first thing anyone thought of the moment word broke that Sheamus was heading for the exit. Even outside the bar, Sheamus built partnerships that showed off his range. He spent time in the League of Nations alongside Alberto Del Rio, Rusev, and Wade Barrett, playing the International Menace act. He later formed the Brawling Brutes, a hard-nosed trio built around his own no-nonsense identity. Whatever the pairing, he made it work because his character had that rare flexibility. Vicious enough to be a credible monster heel, charismatic enough to be a beloved underdog babyface, depending on what the story called for. And through every version of that character, one thing stayed constant: intensity. Sheamus talked about that himself, describing what set him apart. "I think it's the intensity that's something that I've always leaned into, and that's really what sets me apart," he said, reflecting on why he still felt like he belonged in that ring even in his late 40s. He compared himself to Cena, joking that despite being close in age, he still felt like he was just getting started. That self-assessment isn't just ego talk, it's backed by numbers. Across his career, Sheamus amassed more than 1,100 wins, a total most performers never sniff. He's one of 56 men in WWE history to have ever held the WWE Championship, and one of just 11 foreign-born wrestlers to win a Royal Rumble match. There's a reason multiple outlets have already started using the phrase Hall of Fame worthy when writing about him. His resume checks every box except one: he never won the Intercontinental Championship, a gap he'd openly joked about on social media in the weeks before this news broke, posting memes about never capturing that title, which in hindsight looked less like a joke and more like a man aware the clock was running out. By 2019, the bar had split, and Sheamus moved into a stretch of singles competition and shifting alliances that never quite matched the heights of his early prime. He kept working, kept winning matches, kept being reliable, but the world title picture moved on without him. That's the quiet part of a 19-year run. The peak doesn't last forever, and eventually, every veteran ends up fighting for relevance instead of gold, which is exactly the phase Sheamus was in when the injury hit. The injury that, more than anything else, triggered the chain of events leading to this exact moment. If you want to pinpoint the moment this all started tipping toward the exit, it's not the contract conversation. It's the shoulder. Sheamus suffered the injury in November, teaming with John Cena and Rey Mysterio against the Judgment Day. On paper, that night should have been a celebration. It turned into something much heavier once the wrestling world realized what it actually was. That match at Madison Square Garden ended up being John Cena's final Raw appearance. One of the most decorated performers of the past 2 decades walking away from weekly television for the last time, with Sheamus standing right next to him in the ring. And now, that same match is looking like it might have doubled as Sheamus's own final WWE appearance too. Whether either man realized it in the moment or not, he would end up having surgery to repair the injury the following month. And from that point forward, he simply vanished from WWE programming. No angle, no storyline explanation, just gone, recovering, waiting. He hasn't wrestled a match for the company since that November night. And for a wrestler who had just weeks earlier talked about giving everything in every single match. Raw, SmackDown, NXT, even the pre-tapes nobody watches live. That kind of silence must have felt brutal. Because here's the thing, Sheamus wasn't hiding from work. He'd said the opposite just before the injury hit, talking about a match against JD McDonagh right before he went down. He described exactly the mentality that had carried him for 19 years. The day I don't go out there and give 100%. I won't go out there and not give everything I have in every single match. And especially with my neck, he said. That's not the language of a guy looking for a graceful exit. That's a guy planning to keep going, which makes what happened next sting even more. While he was out recovering from surgery, unable to defend himself in the ring or in the room, WWE came to him with a business proposition. He was approached about a restructured extension while sidelined with the injury. And the framing of restructured is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It's the same language used with other veterans recently. The New Day duo of Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods were reportedly asked to accept the same kind of restructured deal earlier in the year, turned it down, and were released as a result. Sheamus watched that play out, and when his own version of that conversation arrived, he swiftly rejected it, no hesitation, no counteroffer drawn out in public, just a hard no. There's a real irony buried in the timeline here too. During an appearance on The Insight with Chris Van Vliet podcast in January of last year, Sheamus talked about signing a brand new 5-year deal with WWE, sounding like a man who had zero intention of going anywhere. His own words from that interview, "I just signed a new 5-year deal. I'll go until the wheels fall off. I'll do it until I can't physically do it anymore. I love what I do," he said, barely more than a year later. That same contract situation had completely flipped. Some reporting suggests the deal he actually signed may have only been a 2-year agreement, rather than the 5-year term he described publicly, which would explain why the expiration is arriving so much sooner than his own comments implied. Either way, the gap between what he said in that podcast and where he is now is jarring. A guy who publicly committed to riding it out until his body gave up, now walking away with plenty left in the tank, on his own terms because of a number on a page rather than a decision about his body. That detail matters because it reframes the whole story. This isn't a case of WWE cutting a guy who couldn't go anymore. Multiple reports have been clear that he wasn't released. His contract was simply allowed to run its natural course, and he chose not to resign. He's still, by all accounts, in good shape and sharp. One outlet noted he's still in great condition and keeps himself sharp as a tack, meaning there's plenty left if he wants to keep going. This wasn't a body breaking down, it was a business relationship breaking down. And the wider context makes that read even clearer. WWE has been renegotiating deals across the roster, asking established veterans to take reduced terms if they want to stay, a pattern that's already claimed other longtime names this year. Sheamus wasn't an isolated incident. He was the latest name in a pattern that's been building for months. That pattern is what makes the injury timing so cruel. He got hurt doing his job in a match that turned into another legend's farewell. And while he was down and recovering, unable to perform and prove his value in real time, the company used that exact window to bring him a smaller number. He said no from a position of physical vulnerability, but financial clarity. He knew what he was worth, and he wasn't going to accept less just because his shoulder was in a sling. That's the wall he hit, not a decline in ability, a decision about worth. And it's that decision, not the injury itself, that turned a quiet contract renewal into the moment wrestlers across two companies started reacting. Once you strip away the emotion, this exit is really a business story. And it's one that other wrestlers clearly recognize, because they've either lived through it themselves or watched it happen to people close to them. The dynamic at play here goes back to how WWE has operated under its current ownership structure. Wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer, writing for the Wrestling Observer, laid out the blunt logic behind decisions like this one. He explained that the company is in the business of paying stars incredible amounts of money who move business, and less so paying those who don't move the needle the same way anymore, pointing out that age becomes a factor in those calculations regardless of how good the matches still are. He didn't mince words about Sheamus's in-ring quality either, noting he was having very good matches when healthy. This wasn't a performance problem, it was a math problem. That math problem has been playing out across the roster all year. After WrestleMania 42, the company parted ways with the New Day. Kairi Sane, the Wyatt Six stable, Apollo Crews, Zelina Vega, and Aleister Black. A wave of departures that shows this isn't personal to any one performer. It's a broader shift in how the company handles its veteran and mid-tier talent under new ownership pressures. Sheamus isn't an outlier, he's a data point in a trend line that's been climbing for months. And the free agency angle only sharpens the stakes. Because he wasn't released and his deal is simply running out, he'll be able to sign anywhere as a free agent immediately once the contract expires. No 90-day non-compete standing in his way. Compare that to what happened with the New Day, who were released outright and therefore hit with the standard waiting period. Sheamus gets to walk straight into whatever's next, no delay, no dead air. That freedom is exactly why speculation has moved so fast, and why a rival champion like MJF didn't wait around to start talking trash. There's no clock keeping this fight from happening soon. The most obvious speculation, unsurprisingly, points toward AEW. Sheamus has ties to several AEW performers beyond Castagnoli, including Adam Copeland, Samoa Joe, and Bryan Danielson, all former or current AEW World Champions who have crossed paths with him inside a WWE ring over the years. One outlet floated a specific scenario worth sitting with: Sheamus reuniting the Bar with Castagnoli inside AEW's Death Riders faction. Since Castagnoli doesn't currently have a consistent full-time tag partner within that group, given Castagnoli's ties to Jon Moxley and the rest of that faction, Sheamus already has history with Moxley and Pac from his WWE days too, which would make the transition almost seamless on a creative level. But it's worth being honest about how speculative all of that still is. As of the initial reporting, there is no actual link connecting Sheamus to AEW. No contract talks, no backstage meetings confirmed. Other paths remain just as live, taking real time away from the ring to let his body fully heal, exploring outside projects away from wrestling entirely. Or, and this shouldn't be dismissed, WWE circling back with a better offer. Once the dust settles and both sides have cooled off, that scenario has precedent with Sheamus specifically. He's clashed with WWE over contract issues in the past, and the last time it happened, it worked out in his favor. He stayed, and the relationship continued. There's no guarantee that pattern breaks this time, but there's no guarantee it repeats either. Then there's the option almost nobody wants to say out loud but everyone's thinking: retirement. He's 48. Modern examples like John Cena, AJ Styles, and even Randy Orton and CM Punk suggest the late 40s into 50 has become something of a natural retirement window in this era of pro wrestling. If Sheamus decided to hang it up entirely, nobody could argue with the resume he'd be walking away from. But most people close to the situation don't think that's likely. Not with a guy who is still calling out the company for an intercontinental title he never got to hold, still posting memes about it days before this news broke. That's not the energy of someone ready to stop. One thing seems almost universally agreed upon across every outlet covering the story: whatever comes next, it deserves to be more than a quiet fade. One report bluntly stated that Sheamus deserved one last match, a proper send-off. but instead looks set to exit the company without a real farewell. No retirement tour, no emotional final segment on Raw. Just an injury, a rejected contract, a changed Twitter bio, and silence from the company itself. For a wrestler with his resume, that's a strange way for a chapter to end. Which is exactly why the reactions from other wrestlers have carried so much weight. They're filling a silence WWE itself hasn't addressed. So where does this actually leave things? Nothing here is finished. That's the part that makes it compelling instead of just sad. MJF's callout is still sitting out there, unanswered publicly by Sheamus himself. No response tweet, no counter jab, nothing. Just silence, the same silence that's defined this entire exit. That silence could mean he's saving his response for the ring instead of Twitter. Which, if you know anything about how a EW booking tends to work, would actually be the smarter move. Show up unannounced, answer the years-old trash talk with a boot to the face instead of a reply. Claudio Castagnoli hasn't publicly commented yet either, at least not in anything that's surfaced. But his own history says plenty about how this kind of decision gets made. When he left WWE back in 2022, he described it as something he thought about carefully. Rather than an impulsive decision, he said a lot of thought went into it, that he felt for a while that he needed a change. And that signs from different people helped him make up his mind without those people even realizing it. He talked about wanting new challenges, wanting to be in the ring with people he hadn't wrestled yet, needing to bet on himself the way a departing NXT talent once encouraged him to. If Sheamus is going through anything close to that same internal calculation right now, Castagnoli would understand it better than almost anyone else in the business. And if the two of them do end up reunited somewhere down the line, it won't just be a nostalgia act. It'll be two guys who each made the exact same leap of faith years apart for a lot of the same reasons. Adam Copeland's path adds one more layer worth sitting with. He didn't plan his AEW run either. It came out of a health scare turning into an opportunity nobody expected. A mountain bike crash that ended up revealing his body could still go. If Sheamus follows any version of that same trajectory, it wouldn't be the first time a WWE legend's quiet exit turned into a loud second act somewhere else entirely. For now, the fans are the ones filling the space nobody else will. Cageside Seats ran an actual poll asking readers what Sheamus should do next, offering a EW, a WWE Performance Center, or NXT coaching role, commentary, TNA, or the independents, and retirement as the options, gathering hundreds of votes within days. That's a community actively trying to write the ending themselves, because the company that employed him for 19 years hasn't given them one yet. And that's really the state of things right now. A 4-time world champion, a 5-time tag champion, a King of the Ring winner, a Royal Rumble winner, a Money in the Bank winner. 1,100 wins, 19 years. One rival already calling him out in public. A tag partner across the aisle who left the exact same way years earlier. A close friend whose own exit story reads like a preview of what might come next. And a bio that now just says pro wrestler, with no company name attached to it for the first time since 2006. Nobody knows yet where Sheamus goes from here. Not the fans voting in polls, not the reporters chasing sources, not even, it seems, WWE itself. But the wrestlers who have already reacted, the call-out, the shared history, the parallel journeys. They're not treating this like an ending. They're treating it like the start of whatever Sheamus does next, wherever